So today, I honestly can't believe this interview happened. I had the privilege of talking to Garrett Wilkerson, who is in charge of public affairs at the U.S. Embassy here in Nepal. Sadly, his posting is ended, and we reflected on his experience here in Nepal, as well as his life journey in general. We talked about growing up in Oregon, studying in Texas, going to South Korea, Belgium, and so much more of the world. A main point that he brought up a lot was pushing himself out of his comfort zone, which is something I really admired. To find out more, enjoy the episode.
Vyas Media Network.
You're leaving the Nepal soon, right? What is like reflecting back on like your stay here? What has been like the best part?
I think that Nepal has been just this crazy, amazing experience for me and certainly for my partner Niels as well. It is, I mean, just incredible culture, warm people, fantastic landscapes. It's been an amazing experience, and I don't like to think about my leaving.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not going to be saying goodbye to Nepal. I'll be saying see you later because I love it here. I look forward to coming back. Lots of dear friends that I've made during my time here in Nepal.
Like there are a lot of countries that you've been to, right? Like Korea, Belgium, just to name a few, right?
Yeah.
What do you think sets Nepal apart from those kind of countries?
Oh, that's a really good question, Manav. I think that Nepal is, in some ways, I think what I've really realized after living in really different parts of the world, right? I've Korea, the UK, the Bahamas, and now here in Nepal. I lived in Bangladesh as well, and I think what I see more is the similarity, the fact that we're just all humans, and we're all trying to get by. And of course, there's really important cultural differences and different ways that we all see the world, and I've definitely observed that. But and I think but going back to your question, what really jumps out to me about Nepalis is their warmth, their openness, their curiosity, and their interest in having a good time, and really their amazing commitment to their culture and to Nepal. I really appreciate that.
I love the way you look at the countries you've been to, right? Because I feel like most people, including myself, we lose sight of the most important thing, which is the people there, right? And we were talking outside just earlier, and you were like, the people make the place, right?
Yeah,
like that's
100%.
Right, and I feel like sometimes we lose sight of that. We can complain about the roads or the government or whatnot here, right? And anywhere else, there's always stuff to complain about, right? But then sometimes we lose track of like some of the most important or the most key parts of a country, which is that the people, the way they behave and the way they interact with each other, which sometimes, do you feel like people lose sight on that sometimes? And how do you think we can focus more the way you do, right? On like the way the people actually are in the country and not what the country actually is physically.
Yeah, and I think what I've noticed as well, and I've noticed this, I'll say, going back to my hometown in Southern Oregon, and certainly everywhere I've lived, this is a common thing. People love to look critically at the place that they live. I think, put a little plug in here for democracy. That's a great thing about democracy, right? Is that we can point out these problems and we can demand that these changes happen. But I think that it's also important for us sometimes because in order for us to make progress, we need to have a positive mindset. We need to be focused on the future. We need to also recognize the progress that we've made, and it's interesting for me when I go back to my hometown in Oregon and I think about some of the problems that we had just with the infrastructure in my hometown, right? And that was a long time ago, the roads and the traffic jams that we had in my hometown. And people in my hometown still will make comments about the traffic and things like that. But now that I come back and I see there's been a huge investments by our state government to help improve the roads and the way that that works. And so I think having that perspective is really helpful. And so I'm always like, well, actually things are a lot better than they used to be when I was here. And I think similarly, I guess my advice is getting out and seeing the world, seeing things, and maybe that's just in your community. Maybe that's, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go abroad, right? You can certainly see that if you travel to another city, if you spend time out outside of your comfort zone. I think that's really helpful.
Sometimes I think we forget like how big our country is, right? Even like a small country in terms of land size, like Nepal, like you go to all these different places and you just feel like you're in a different place, right?
Yeah.
You go to Mustang, right?
Oh, amazing.
And all these places, like you just, sometimes you're like, wow, like it's almost like a different place,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes like maybe this is for me as well, like I feel like maybe I should explore more in my own country before actually trying to like leave and explore the world,
Yeah.
Where did your love for like exploring come from? Because at a young age, even you decided like, okay, I want to go study in Belgium. I want to do a semester in Korea, right? Like, where did these decisions come from? What sparked it?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's really, when I was really young, I loved reading. I still remember being around 9-10 years old, and I started reading lots of books. And I was very interested in books that took place in foreign countries, characters having adventures in all corners of the globe. And I think that I was always very interested in traveling. But I first did that within the United States. And at 12 years old, I remember traveling with my grandma to Virginia to go explore some of the colonial towns there. And that was a new experience for me, and I was 12 years old, but I convinced my grandma to take me on this trip. And I don't know why she agreed to it, but I'm so glad she did. And it really got me outside of my comfort zone, and it really lit this fire in me. But I'll say I like to jokingly say my first study abroad experience was when I went to university in Texas, which is very different from my home state in Oregon, and was a bit of culture shock even when I moved there. The United States, is a big country, and we have a lot of different regional culture, and so that was a big change for me. And from there, I went to Korea. That was crazy culture change for me, and all of that.
It's almost like you just love stepping out of your comfort zone, right? Because, for example, for me right now, I'm trying to make this, like at the time of recording, I'm trying to make this decision of whether to go abroad or not, right? And I made this decision to go abroad because I wanted to step outside my comfort zone, right? Because over here, like, I'm really comfortable.
Right.
Like, I've gotten to the point where I realized that, like, it's not easy. You still got to work hard, but, like, I'm comfortable here, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think? We all talk about, like, push yourself out of your comfort zone, do something that pushes you to your limits, right? And we say all these things, but then nobody actually talked about like what the benefit is, right? Like, why should we actually do that, right? Why do you, like someone that is traveling all the time, as soon as you get comfortable, like 3 years, you're gonna leave to somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
What do you think pushing yourself out of your comfort zone does for you?
Well, I think it allows me to test myself. And it allows me to, you see things really clearly when you're outside of your comfort zone, when you are in a new place and you don't know how things work and you don't know who's who and you have no connections, you don't have your family, you don't have a support network, and it puts a lot of emphasis on you to solve the problems, to figure things out. And I credit a lot to who I am today. Who I am today is a product of me getting out of my comfort zone. I would not be a U.S. diplomat. I would not be living in Nepal. I would be in a very, very different place, and I think living a very different life. And so I'm just like deeply thankful for the opportunities I've had, that I've been able to get out of my comfort zone. There's a lot of privilege in order to do that. But a lot of it was drive from me, wanting to, I don't know, see the world and to do new things and to challenge myself. And I'm so glad that I did.
When you push yourself out of the comfort zone, what I hear from you is that it's like character development, right? Like you learn so much about yourself because there's nobody to help you or almost guide you, right? Yeah, those people, yes, they're a phone call away, but at the end of the day, it's you in a new country. You're learning how to communicate. You're doing all these different things, right? And you just learn so much more about yourself and how you navigate these situations, right? I feel like when I push myself out of my comfort zone, that's how I feel, right?
Right.
What have you learned about yourself on this journey of traveling to so many different places?
I think that I've learned that I am. Oh man, Manav, that's a really good question. I gotta think about this for a second because I wanna honor it with a good answer.
Please take your time.
Because I think for myself, when I look at what I've learned about myself, it would be that I am. I'm equally stressed by, like, I love stability. On the one hand, I love stability and I love predictability. I'm a planner. And when I get outside of my comfort zone, that I have and I like to be in control, right? I like to be in control of things. And when I'm outside of my comfort zone, that is very clear to me, right? And I realize that I can't, there's only so much that I can do to control the situation. I have to go with it. And I think that that's brought out in me an ability to be more flexible and to be open and to learn from my experiences. And I think that had I not been challenged in that way, I wouldn't have done that. I think my growth as a person would have stopped a long time ago, frankly. And so, yeah.
Is there a specific story in your life that you can like vividly recall and be like that really pushed me to my limits, but I learned so much from that, like that was a real struggle.
Yeah.
But what was that story?
Well, I can, and I'm sorry to keep putting this in terms of career, but I'm going to do it. Okay. So I was in Washington, D.C. I just finished my undergraduate degree, and I had spent a summer as an intern in Washington, and I had this really nice job offer to stay in Washington and work. And I was really excited by that. And that was a big deal, not just for me, but, for my community, my home, my hometown and everything. To be in Washington, D.C. with a good job was something very cool. But there was this part of me that really wanted to go back to South Korea because I had studied abroad there. I had spent one semester there, and it had not been enough time for me. And I had unfinished business, I felt like, in Korea. And I was given a job offer there to be an English teacher.
So you were given two job offers, one in D.C. and one in Korea.
Right. And I honestly was deeply conflicted because I felt like if I took the job in Washington, that would be like the respectable, responsible thing to do. But going to Korea, I was going into, yes, I was familiar with Korea after spending one semester there, but I didn't, like being an English teacher, that was new for me, working in a school, all of these things. And I remember asking my parents, like, what do I do, and will you be embarrassed of me if I, take this job as an English teacher in Korea? And they were like, no, absolutely not. Like, you should go out and do what you want to do. And if you're feeling that, like, you got to just make this decision on your own, right? And they weren't a lot of help, actually, because they were like, this is on you to decide.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I decided to kind of jump off the cliff and go to Korea and be an English teacher. I learned so much from that experience. That's really how I learned how to work with people in a different cultural setting. I was working with teachers in Korean schools and Korean teachers and Korean students, and I had to learn a lot about Korean culture. I had to learn about Korean language and all of that in order to thrive.
Sometimes when we're not given a choice, we feel like, oh, it'd be so good to have a choice right now, right? But when
Yeah.
we have a choice like that, right? Like, I know exactly how you feel, right? I'm bringing it up again. It sounds pretty plain, but like making this decision of going to Norway or staying in Nepal
Yeah.
was a big decision for me because there were a lot on both ends, right?
Sure.
On one hand, going to Norway was like embracing a new culture and being in a global school with all these cool people, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, over here, it's like, well, I've got my family here.
Yeah.
I've got people like you that I can talk to. Unfortunately, you're leaving, but like, I have a community here, right?
Sure.
Like, do I really want to leave that behind? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And sometimes you really got to make those decisions on your own. Because I feel like even my parents were like, you know what, like, we'll help you in any way we can, but we're not gonna make this decision for you.
Yeah.
And I think when people make key decisions like that for you, it's really hard to. That relationship, it's a burden. Not a burden, but it puts some strain on it because if
Yeah.
something goes wrong, if
It's not my
something
fault.
doesn't,
Yeah,
it's not your fault. It's like, oh, you made
Yeah.
me go, right?
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
thing, right? And it's really important to make those decisions on your own, right?
I agree.
Where do you think you would be right now if you had taken that job in DC?
I'd probably be in DC.
Still in DC.
Yeah, that's my guess. I would, and I don't think I would be as happy, and I don't think I would be as satisfied with my life. I love my life. I love where I've ended up. I am so glad that I've made the decisions that I did, and I respect the importance of decisions, and I think you're totally right. I'm hoping you'll go to Norway.
Yeah, no,
I've
already decided. The contract has been signed.
Okay, good, man. You can guess where my advice is.
Yeah. Would you encourage all young people to travel at a young age?
Sure, I would. And maybe that, and again, I don't know that has to be abroad. Sometimes that can be like move to a different city. Maybe it's going to a different school. Maybe it's moving to a different part of your city. You know, we can all find ways that we move outside of our comfort zone. But I do, if you have, the drive and the determination and the strength to do it, and we all do, I think so. Going abroad is an amazing experience. I think that I'm a better American because I've spent time outside of the United States, and when I come back to the United States, and the way that I contribute to my country is really rooted in my experiences abroad. And I think the same is true for young Nepalis who are going abroad. Coming back to Nepal, contributing to Nepal's future, it's a tremendous gift to the country.
No, 100%. I totally agree. When you travel, you were talking about how you come back to Oregon, you come back to the U.S., and you've kind of just embraced this new culture and you kind of take it forward in your life, right?
Yeah.
What does that look like? Like, how do you, like, when you leave Nepal, it's not like, oh, you've forgotten about Nepal. There's stuff you've learned here. There's stuff about the culture that you've embraced, right? And you'll probably use in the next couple of years or maybe even for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, yes, rest of my life, I would say.
How
probably.
do you carry that forward?
I think maintaining connections is important. So as I think about my future and I think about all of the close friendships that I've developed in Nepal, I think about how am I going to maintain these relationships, right? How am I going to come back to visit Nepal? How am I going to meet friends halfway? How am I going to continue to engage with my friends online and through social media and follow Nepali culture and news and things like that? I do that. I've had amazing formative experiences in South Korea, in the Bahamas. I still see my good friend Reno from the Bahamas. We try to meet up at least once a year, and so far we've been successful. We're planning our next meetup, because if you don't invest in those relationships, it can be kind of all for naught. And I say that at the same time because you also have to know when maybe relationships, like it's a bit of a balance. But not to take the conversation off in a different direction, but I think, again, going back to people and the importance of people, that's at the center of how I stay connected to my experiences and how I continue to carry forward the lessons I've learned and everything from my time abroad.
The way you've embraced the Nepali culture, like people can see it, the way you've embraced it, it's like so nice, right? But part of your job is also to bring like US and like democracy and all these different things to Nepal and make them more aware, right? How do you strike the balance? Because you don't want to force these opinions or these views, let's say, onto people, but you also don't want to.
Not at all.
But then you also want to inform them, right? And you also want to kind of mix it in with that culture, which sometimes can be difficult, right? How do you manage that balance?
Well, I would look at it from, contributing to the conversation, that's going on in Nepal already, and offering, I think, America's experience, America's challenges, not just success, right? There's so many ways that the United States has fallen short on a variety of topics, right? And we often are sharing those experiences with our international partners. And so, but alongside with the success and what we've seen works well. And so I think that's sort of my approach, is to just, I want to be a part of a conversation, which means that two people or more are talking together and there's information and there's experiences going back and forth, right? I'm informed by, and I learn a lot from Nepalis talking about these topics from their point of view and from their experience, and certainly Nepal's history and culture and the way that Nepalis see the world. It's important for me, and that's part of my job as a diplomat, is to see that and to learn from it.
And almost like the way you've embraced it, then you kind of, you're applying it, right? You're not just coming here and giving a speech and leaving, right? You're kind of embracing that and you're kind of working as a team almost, right?
Yeah, I do think that teamwork is a great way to kind of frame our relationship with a lot of countries, and it's a friendship, right? And it's the way that we still exchange views and points of perspective with our friends. We do that with countries as well.
Part of your job is you have to work with a lot of people, right? And sometimes that can be really challenging, right? We were talking about this off camera. And what do you think, how do you deal with those challenges? Because clearly by just talking to you for like a few minutes outside and here right now, like I can tell you're very passionate about what you do and you love what you're doing, right? But sometimes there are always those frustrating moments of like, especially working with other people and losing that sense of control, right?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that, and how do you stay motivated to do what you do?
Ooh, that's a big question as well. I think it's important to approach any sort of relationship with a lot of humility. And when you reach a point where you're disagreeing and you're trying to work through an issue, and I'll stay away from examples because I don't know that they would, honor the question, right? But I think it's important to continue to look at topics from their point of view. So sometimes when somebody is telling you, no, that's not possible, or this is what I want to do, when you're saying, well, this is what I want to do, is that I think it's an important opportunity for you to step back and kind of say, whoa, okay, so how are they looking at this topic? What are their motivating factors in their analysis of the situation? And so how can that help me better respond to them? How can that help me better reach a point where we can conclude this? And I've found it, I know it sounds really simple, and probably a lot of people think that that's a pretty obvious thing, but I'm pretty surprised by the number of people who don't always do that, and where they just continue to kind of take a hard line and, this is what I want to accomplish.
They're not like open to...
Yeah, and think that by winning the conversation, you're suddenly going to...
You
achieve something.
Yeah.
And I think those moments where it's like, oh, did I win the conversation? Like that always makes me a little nervous. Like, oh no, this isn't going to actually achieve what I hoped it would. I want there to be an exchange. I want there to be a negotiation. I want there to be a collaboration.
I think it's all about compromise, right? I think when you're working with all these different parties, all these different people, it's hard to satisfy everybody, right? And what they are looking to do, but it's all about compromising and kind of giving people the majority of what
Yeah.
they want and what kind of things they want to achieve, right?
Yeah.
However, we're all human, right? And
Right.
we're not perfect or flawed, right? Like,
Super.
you've probably made a lot of mistakes, right? And how do you deal with those mistakes as being a person in such a high rank? And how do you learn from those mistakes?
You're very nice. I don't, I don't think I'm such a
Yeah.
high ranking person, but I certainly take seriously my job and the responsibility that goes along with that. And I think I think I've been mindful over the years to really be thoughtful and methodical, follow a really clear decision tree when I'm, so for my job, right, I'm the chief of public affairs for the embassy. I oversee all of our public messaging, working with my team of Nepalis and Americans together, right? So it's really important to get that right, because if you're going to say something publicly, you want to really put a lot of thought behind it. And we put a tremendous amount of effort to make sure that we're understood well. And so I bring that up as an example. Like, I think that really not rushing to a decision and not rushing to put out the first thing that comes to mind and not be as reactive, or find that balance between being quick but not,
Not rush.
not rushed and not, ending up making the situation worse or being misunderstood for me is the worst thing. We want to be understood. Even if it's people don't like what you're going to say, at least they understand what you're saying, right? So, I think that just being really thoughtful and methodical, it's something that I feel like I've learned over the years as a professional. Maybe when I started out in my career, I was a little bit quicker to just respond as a private citizen, but I'm not a private citizen. I have to look at this through it's a much bigger thing that I'm representing.
Clearly, there's a lot of responsibility when you come here on like a public platform and you're talking. Clearly, there's a lot of pressure. There's, let's not say pressure, more like
The stakes are high.
The stakes are high, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. How do you remain so calm under those kind of circumstances?
I think practice. It's another annoying answer.
Yeah.
But
No. Totally.
I think that anybody who thinks that you're born knowing how to, be a public speaker or to get out there and stay sort of balanced in a public setting, I don't really believe it. I think it's a lot of practice, and I'm still learning. So I'm still trying to get better.
I really admire people like you who have gotten to like your age and your like the stage in life that you are, and it's not like you're done learning, right? You're always open to like changing and kind of learning new things, right? And I think I really hope to carry that mindset forward beyond my schooling, I guess, right?
Yeah. In
terms of like being raised in the U.S., right? Like,
sure.
what was that like? What was your childhood like?
Yeah, I grew up in the countryside in Southern Oregon. I lived out far. It was about 30 minutes from the city, but I grew up around farm animals and lots of open land, and I grew up in that community as well. In rural America, and I think that is for me. I feel like being within the U.S. Foreign Service, within U.S. Diplomatic service, it's a bit unique, and it's certainly shaped my perspective.
What's it like living on like big farmland in the U.S.? Like, do you go like get eggs every morning? Like, what's that like?
It's very quiet. That's the first thing I remember when I come back from South Asia. I remember when I moved back from Bangladesh, and I had just finished living in Bangladesh, where I was just around people all the time, and I was living in Dhaka, and there was a vehicle or a person near me at all times, and then I went back and I stayed with my parents, and it was so quiet, and there was no lights, like no street lights, and I was like, oh, I've been away from here for a while, so. But I think it's a really unique way of life in the United States. I think I'm from the West Coast, right? I'm from Oregon, just above California, and there is still to this day a bit of like, frontier spirit that you feel in the way that sort of our local culture in Oregon, and certainly the story of my ancestors is migrating to the U.S. And then migrating slowly across the United States until we ended up in Oregon, where I came along.
It's a beautiful story, and I think being the way you're raised definitely had a big impact on the way you pursue your life, right? Like,
Yep.
I think the main part is, yes, like the place you grew up, like being in a farm, being in that open space, and then going to Dhaka and coming back. I guess you also appreciate that a lot more, right? You appreciate what Dhaka had to offer, but you also appreciate what the countryside in Oregon also had to offer,
Sure.
right? But I think another big part of becoming who you are is like the impact your parents have at a young age, right?
Yeah.
Well, how were you raised in terms of morals, in terms of just like childhood in general?
Yeah, I was very lucky to have great role models in both of my parents, people who, were very open and very friendly. They always had a lot of friends, and I learned a lot from that I use in my job now. And I think it was really important to make the right decision. And the right decision meant not like the most advantageous or it was the morally the best decision. And that is today still a responsibility that I carry, and it weighs heavy on me, is making a good moral decision, no matter what I'm doing. And I'm really glad that my parents instilled that in me. But that said, I have a lot of friends who weren't always as lucky in terms of their home life growing up, but they've still gone on to be really great people, and I really respect them too. But I'm very lucky that I had that.
I was reading an article today on the Kathmandu Post, and it was about you, and you were talking about, like, in your spare time, one thing that you do for yourself is read, right? We were talking about your love for books, literature, and how from a young age you just love to read, right?
Yes.
Why do you think reading is so important? Because I am someone who doesn't read a lot, but I get it from my parents, like, every day, right?
Yeah.
Like, and a lot of schools these days, especially international schools, will really promote reading.
Yeah.
Right? What do you think reading from a young age has done for you? Besides discovering that love for travel, I guess.
Yeah. I think it makes me a better communicator. And so what I notice is when I'm not, and I, full disclosure, I probably end up reading a lot more news than anything. I mean, I try to read a lot of long articles and whatnot, but I always notice that when I go back to reading books, I become a better writer. I become more articulate. It really, kind of addresses that part of my brain that feeds off of the creativity and the artistry that writers put on display.
What's your favorite thing to read? Just in general, news, articles, books, genres.
Yeah, I really like reading news, probably. But away from the current affair, like the breaking news, like going deeper into the deeper reporting on what's happening in society, what are people up to. I love articles on like, oh, this is this fashion designer and this is what, this is their story. I love documentaries about people and people's stories. I love, on the one hand, these like really kind of nerdy documentaries, art house movies, but on the other hand, I like really trashy reality TV. But for me, it's the story that always.
Do you have any good like book or movie recommendation that I should go home and start right now?
I'm gonna have to text you about that later.
Yeah, this one's for me.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
I just need to know.
Okay.
Like, I'm about to be on a holiday, so I'm like, what do I do? Like, maybe a good series. Do you watch a lot of series?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
What are you watching? Anything right now?
Yeah, I mean, I watch, well, like on a daily basis, I watch a lot of reality TV. I don't know that they would be so interesting to a lot of people because I'm very interested in like property shows about like renovations and things like that. But that's like what I would watch on a daily basis. But I think like Max or HBO has just really fantastic series. I most recently was watching Tokyo Vice, fantastic television. Hacks, wow, really, really well written. And I'm always a big fan of 6 Feet Under, Sopranos. So a lot of HBO series are important to me. But I watch, I watch Netflix. I watch it all.
Thank you so much for your time, Garrett. Like, I really do appreciate it. I just have 2 more questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yep.
One is like, you're a diplomat. You work with embassies. You work in DC. You work in DC, right? If you weren't doing this kind of work, what do you think you'd be doing?
I like to think that I would be making music videos.
Oh, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
And it's so cool that you like get to work with artists, so you still get like a taste of that life, right?
Yeah.
I don't actually have a second question. But thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, this has been great, Manav. Thanks for the chat.
I know you're really busy. We went a bit over time, but I hope you don't mind.
No worries at all.
Really appreciate it.
This was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vyas Media Network.